Hello and welcome to ACS's Industry Insights, a series that features some of ICT's most respected leaders, exploring innovation, challenges and opportunities in the constantly evolving tech world. My name is Michael Blumenstein and I'm the Director of the Technical Advisory Board at the ACS. These interviews have been designed to allow you, ACS members and our viewers to submit your questions and have them answered by our experts. Please send your questions through Twitter, Facebook, YouTube or Periscope, remembering to use hashtag ACS Live. Our seventh speaker is the distinguished Sarah Adam-Gedge, Managing Director at Avanade Australia and Non-Executive Director at Austal. Thank you for joining us and welcome, Sarah. Sarah, you've been on an upbuilding professional trajectory for many years. You spent over 12 years with IBM and in various roles and then joining Avanade. Tell us a little bit about your Avanade journey.
Well, it's a great time to be working in an organisation that is able to work with all of our clients, because that's what Avanade does. We work with Australian clients and global. Avanade's a global organisation during a time when most organisations, be they government or commercial enterprise, are going on digital transformation journeys, and that's really what the team at Avanade does. They bring great skills working collaboratively with clients, and you know, during my experiences, you know, going back over, as you just mentioned, over a decade, you know, I'm very interested in what the future holds. I like seeing what futurists say about the next 5 to 10 to 15 years. You know, some of the things that I think really resonates with me and keeps me absolutely fascinated by digital and by the technology change is, you know, I'd say that I'm a learner. You know, I'm curious about what's going on. I really enjoy understanding how business works or different organisations work and joining the dots around that. You know, I don't mind a change environment. You know, we're always in change. You know, sort of you just turn the corner and there's something else coming. And, you know, I think I'm, you know, pretty resilient to that, and you need to be, and you need to be really looking for, you know, what the next change is.
Well, interestingly, the US is Australia's largest ICT trading partner, and I think it's around 30% of ICT services exports and imports were measured in 2015. So what could Australian businesses do to capitalise on that special relationship, and how might Australia take advantage of other markets outside the US?
Well, it is fantastic that the US is such a huge trading partner around ICT, because that's an extraordinary proportion of our skills. I think the key to retaining that and growing it and expanding it, as you say, into the rest of Asia Pacific is really around making sure that we stay an innovative or an economy of innovation, and that really talks to skills. And I think therein lies a big challenge. No doubt we'll talk about that a little bit more. You know, a big challenge for Australia, because some of those Asia Pac nations, Singapore, as an example, probably are further along when it comes to innovation. China, on the other hand, they're a huge trading partner, but not in ICT, more in the, you know, the iron ore, the coal, the beef, agricultural areas, as is Japan, and in fact Singapore. So I think there's opportunity there, but it does speak to, you know, probably a critical window we've got in Australia at the moment around innovation.
Well, you mentioned skills there, and I think you've collaborated with some of the most talented people during the course of your career. Are there any thought leaders that you particularly have inspired you or influenced you, and why?
For me, it's really hard to go past somebody like Satya Nadella. And in fact, I joined Avanade. He's the CEO of Microsoft. Avanade works closely with Microsoft. I joined Avanade because I could see, you know, 4 years ago what fantastic things he was doing with the Microsoft business globally. And over Christmas I had the chance to read Hit Refresh, and I'm going to read that again. And it was, you know, great. He talks about you know, sort of rediscovering the soul of Microsoft and imagining a better future. I love the way, as a CEO, he talks about the C in CEO, standing for culture. There's not a lot of other CEOs that might say that. And I really also take to heart, it really resonates with me what he thinks good leadership is. And, you know, he talks about having clarity of purpose, really injecting energy and making it happen. And, you know, I think that's very relevant for Australia. You know, I can relate to it. If I go sort of to the side of that, I talked a minute ago around futurists. So I do a lot of reading. 2030 as a year sort of as an anchor point for me. I think it's because my youngest daughter will probably start her working career, hopefully after university, in 2030. And futurists tend to sort of look out 5 to 10 years, but that's sort of a bit of an anchor point. And, you know, I like, certainly I've read what Klaus Schwab has said in the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I think it gives great insights and shifts us away from just digital transformation into the benefits that AI are going to bring. And more recently, I think what, I was just thinking of the name, Leonard Gerd has written. You may not have heard of him, but he's saying in this really environment where algorithms are at the core of everything we do, you know, we talk about technology solutions, we're really becoming algorithmic organisations. I stumbled across that. And he's really bringing out the human side, and he refers to algorithms and androrhythms really being, you know, what's going to be more important. And this is coming back to Satya Nadella again, is the human side. So compassion, empathy, you know, sort of respect, you know, because there is a lot of technology around, but, you know, our heart can't be consumed by it.
Well, it's interesting, you know, all those leaders you mentioned there, and from one leader to the next. Peter James, chairman of Macquarie Telecom Group, Nearmap and Drone Shield. I mean, he says he's a big believer in product-led businesses, wherein the technology must be authentic. So how do successful businesses go about keeping true to that motto?
Yeah, there's been quite a change in the last few years around the, you know, this word, you know, sort of authentic. And when I think about it in our organisation, we work with clients and we see our clients doing this, is that if you take the proposition that technology can really tackle most things these days, it's less about the technology, it's less about the how, and it's more around the what and the why. And to be authentic, you've got to really think about, okay, what is the experience that we want to create, and for who? And so we hear of terms like personas. The way I think about it is the end user going to be a patient in a hospital, a student, a customer in a retail shop, you know, an employee in an organisation. So what's the user experience that you want to create? And you know, that's referred to as human-centred design. It's very basic. It's not complex. It makes a lot of sense. And you know, in that way, you can have far more authentic approach to, you know, developing a solution that's meaningful and can create great experiences.
Yeah, that's true, and I think well, another person I'd like to quote. I'm quoting a lot of people at the moment, but the chief executive of CEDA said in a report recently, and I quote, "Globalisation has brought significant benefits for Australia. However, while at IBM, you said that 700 to 900 billion worth of future capital expenditure resources could be lost if Australia doesn't innovate. That's a bit scary. Can you highlight some of the innovative changes that we need to make and pinpoint where these changes connect with global benefits?
I'm really passionate about this topic, and there is no doubt that Australia's been very fortunate over the last 2 to 3 decades and has had economic growth during that time, even during the GFC. Some might say that we are still paying for that, you know, with deficits and so forth. I'm not going to go into that political arena. And when I said that, it was at the beginning of the mining boom, and I guess the point that I would make then, which I think still holds, is that at the beginning of that mining boom, when, you know, the Chevrons, Impexes, Woodsides, all of those organisations had massive business cases to put in what they have subsequently done, and that's these large gas fields that have come to first gas and have produced, you know, great product for Australia to mostly export. I can remember at that time there was $700 to $900 billion worth of capital programs to come. But of course they have to stand in their own right, so they have to stand based on commodity pricing and also being productive and competitive around being able to deliver those in Australia. So really that comes back to be productive and competitive. We need to have an innovative economy. And this is very topical. I think it was at the beginning of this year, so a month ago, the innovation report has come out from the chief scientist, I think it's Bill Ferris. He's come out with 30 recommendations. I wonder where to start with all of that, but when you think about innovation in Australia, all the reports say that we are way behind, we're lagging, and in fact we're dropping back. And that's of significant concern. One of the biggest drivers of us dropping back is skills, and our skills around digital competencies. So when I think of some of the things that we should be doing, because we have a history of great innovation, Wi-Fi, the black box in aeroplanes. So we have this history of great innovation, but that means that we need to have a culture of it. We need to have a test and learn, or sort of accept sometimes we fail type culture. Collaboration across industry, government has a role here, academia certainly has a role. Collaboration is very important. And there's a lot that we can draw on, a lot of best practices out there. Some of these 30 recommendations talk about, should we have a hub? Should we have an innovation hub in Australia? And obviously there's Silicon Valley in the US. Israel is known to have, certainly an innovation hub around tech and cyber. I happened to see something in the New York Times. It was an article about Adelaide, about Elon Musk building the biggest battery in Adelaide, and should that be Australia's innovation hub? And I think that's somewhat ironic when today in the paper it's talking about they're going to have more blackouts because of the lack of infrastructure for power. So I think we've got a window of opportunity here. So I'm very optimistic, but we really need to have a look at some of those 30 recommendations, and as Satya Nadella says, we need to really make it happen.
I couldn't agree with you more around those. Just a little bit going back to Avanade again, in relation to some of its what it considers missions or some important aspects that Avanade considers important for its clients. It's about delivering business critical technology solution to its clients. So obviously we're in these digital transformative times at the moment. What are some of the pitfalls that you keep seeing your clients face and that your team must seek to rectify?
Yeah, I mean, when I think of clients, I think more of the challenges, that they have. But certainly things that, we try to help them with is very much thinking about the human-centred design that we talked about before, because historically, sort of organisations sort of come at technology and do a project and, basically put some sort of technology solution into their organisation. It may not meet their future needs. It may not create those great customer experiences, because our clients pretty much all have end users, whether it's a retailer or whether it's a government agency. And so we really try to think about the work that we're doing with them and help them think about that customer experience, let's say, for the organisation. We're very much of the view that, test and learn, MVPs, pilots, and I think our thinking behind this is there needs to be velocity. The change is so fast that you can stare at something and think, should we do this or shouldn't we do this? You can wait a year, things will have changed, and you may be not current. Left behind. So that whole area of agility and velocity, we try to help clients around that. And I think the last area, which is really in the dialogue and the conversation, as opposed to being widely adopted, is that with all that technology can do and with all that digital can do, is really thinking about the ethical considerations that come of it. And, we've got, I don't know if Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, he's going to be called, Mark, I'm sorry, Zuckerberg, in the future, because he's saying I'm sorry a lot at the moment. And you look at that and you think about, he or Facebook would never have intended some of the consequences that we're now listening to in relation to how Facebook data is being used. The same with, Uber now stalling the trials for the autonomous vehicles. There's great intent there, around, some, sort of just different ways, autonomous driving, autonomous trucks. There's great opportunity there, but just, sort of the ethical considerations and the unintended consequences is really just reminding us that just because technology can do something, it may not be actually what you want to actually have happen. So I think that area of digital ethics, we've done a lot of research on that over the last few years in Avanade. We're just trying to raise that as the agenda topic. But then it sort of swings back to thinking about the human side of it, which is kind of where I started with. So, I suppose, Michael, I've talked about some things in practice, but also some things that we're seeing for the future.
Yeah, and I think all of this is sort of encapsulated in the aspect of innovation. And so I want to just go back to that a little bit more and talk about Avanade and how it highlights three main innovation trends that will soon drive the company and its opportunities. So augmented and virtual reality, automation, and voice and virtual assistants. Now, how soon will these trends take root, and what separates these three trends from some of the less durable ones?
Yeah, so these three areas were areas that when we came into this calendar year we thought were important trends for 2018. We're certainly seeing the realities, as we call it, mixed reality. We're seeing that come to the fore in many spaces, so especially where there needs to be a good experience, good customer experience. So retailers are the obvious one, and sort of IKEA now, if you were buying a couch in IKEA, you could put the goggles on and you could look at your look in your lounge room and put that couch up against the wall. Does it fit? Is the colour good? You probably can't sit on it, but you can actually, get a bit of a sense, is that going to work? Is that going to work in my home? So we've seen the realities really come to the fore. Now that technology is not pervasive, but it's got many great use cases. Mining, thinking about what I was talking about before with the big gas companies, they want to do a lot of work that's remote. And you can see how the virtual realities, the mixed realities are really going to help there. Certainly around automation, we're seeing that everywhere. Maybe it's not end-to-end across an organisation, but we're seeing a lot of automation pilots where organisations are really looking to take more efficiencies out of the organisation, move away from mundane, repetitive, high volume tasks and get that done through technology. So, that we do a lot of work with our clients around that, and we've teamed up with some great technology providers. Blue Prism is one in particular that seems to be going very well. That last one though, voice has been around for a long time, and I think now with more of the technology enablement around machine learning, advanced analytics, we're getting voice to be more predictable. So that's been some of the issues in the past. I might say something to you and instead of saying Kleenex, you think it's Phoenix. That's just not going to work if in sort of a voice sense. But now it's becoming more predictable. There's many examples of how that's going to be used. Virtual assistants, so if you wanted to book travel, just you can just book that travel and it will probably be interpreted really well instead of having to go and sort of search for that. So voice is I think for me personally, I think that's one of the biggest trending areas. All of these areas are going to be pretty durable because we talked innovation, and one of the challenges for Australia is that we kind of hit this productivity plateau. And how do we sort of step change through that? It's being able to bring some of the benefits from these emerging technologies and, being able to get that step change that will help, innovation, that will help Australia in terms of its quest to be competitive globally.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. We'll now go for a short break, and when we return, we'll look to take a few questions that have been submitted through Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or Periscope using hashtag ACS Live. If you haven't yet submitted your question, take advantage of the break to do so, and we'll be back in a moment.
You have to embrace technology. It's going to empower you, and technology will empower the ideas that will change the world.
The biggest thing that's going to set apart those who will benefit most from technology is curiosity.
The job that they're going to be doing in 10 or 15 years' time doesn't exist right now.
It's pretty much, if you can imagine it, you can make that job happen.
There's a lot of scope for you to be bold, to push forward, to be brave.
Welcome back to ACS Industry Insights with Sarah Adam-Gedge. Thank you for submitting your questions. We'll ask Sarah a couple that we've taken from our audience who are watching tonight from as far afield as Singapore and South Africa. Lena has written to us on Twitter and asks, there is so much talk about being a disruptor, but Australia has strong and successful markets. How do we fill out the niche markets and enhance them with tech?
Yeah, well, look, I'm really passionate about this because whilst I've, sort of given some thoughts about the fact that we need to do more and be more innovative, we have got great success stories. We are on the global stage around our mining companies, and the very big miners here are huge success stories. The other area I think is around agriculture, and I think we've got an opportunity here with a hungry world to feed. To really be a food bowl of the future. Not only Australia but also New Zealand has that opportunity. So then when you think of what technology can do and you think about some niches within agriculture, whether it's milk, whether it's legumes, whether it's soil technology, the same can be said in mining. I think in those areas that we're already good and strong and there's high demand, ICT has to be another one because of our, as you pointed out, our trading relationship with the US, although that's a very competitive area. So in those areas that we are strong, I think we can find niches there and bring digital transformation, through those more niche industries. That's
great. We still have a couple more questions from our viewers. Charmaine on YouTube wants to know your thoughts on skilled migration in the technology space, particularly the Global Talent Scheme, which has just been announced.
Okay, so I'm assuming that's meaning skilled migration into Australia. I think there's, ACS itself has actually looked at the ICT skills shortage for the future. That's great opportunity for all of us and great opportunity for if we can get the right amount of people coming through into the university courses and so forth, it means that there's a very, very strong demand. Obviously we have got a lot of skills in Australia that have come from offshore. There are changes there that I know that the government is bringing around in terms of, making sure that those skills are very, very relevant to Australia. I think that is going to continue. We are going to be an importer of, great skills into Australia and probably an exporter of people who have built great skills here offshore as well.
That's very true. Thanks for that. We have one more viewer question, and it comes from Alan, who says, data is the new oil. How has the Australian ICT industry caught up with this, and what's next?
Yeah, I agree with that too. That's a great question. I think data is really finding its day now. So after maybe a decade or so of huge investments into data, and people talk about big data and data insights and so forth, now what we've got is these emerging technologies that are really going to rely on advanced analytics. They're relying on the data. This is when data has its moment, and it is the new oil. And if organisations can really harness all these investments that they've made, and some organisations may regret if they haven't made the data investments, but it's going to be critical for the AI, emerging tech areas to really benefit organisations going forward.
Thanks, Sarah. We'll ask a few more viewer questions following the next break, and remember to submit them using hashtag ACS Live. So just rolling on with the questions, Avanade is a research patron of MIT's Centre for Information Systems Research. Avanade's global survey found that, I quote, both digital and AI technologies must coexist in intelligent automation for companies to stay relevant. Can you discuss some of the inciting headways Avanade and MIT researchers working towards this?
This is a fantastic relationship that Avanade has developed with MIT. And the CISA organisation is an organisation that does really robust research into iconic organisations that are transforming themselves or going through digital transformation. And it really brings a lot of weight to a lot of the advisory work that we do and the transformation work that we do. So that teaming for us has been terrific because it's brought sort of insights that give rigour to some of the work that we're actually trying to do with clients. And organisations have been on this, let's say, digitising path for years. So that's not new. So technology change has been around for nearly all of my career. The real difference though now is, through artificial intelligence capabilities or intelligent automation. You can coin these phrases, there are really umbrella terms for advanced analytics, more cognitive capabilities. It's really the combination of these that's actually bringing digital transformation as opposed to just putting the technology and digitisation of your organisation. So this is what's going to bring around changes to operating models, new revenue streams. So, if you're a health insurance organisation, just think of what you can do with the data and the insight that you get from dealing with all of your customers. And we can see health insurance organisations thinking of, how can they, bring product to market that's more around wellness? What are the adjacent spaces that you can move into? And this is because they're able to use these emerging technologies, with very, very strong backbones that have been put in place over the last 10 to 20 years.
I couldn't agree with you more, actually. And speaking of sort of insights, ACS's 2017 edition of Australia's Digital Pulse highlights the point that consumers and businesses are the primary drivers of Australia's digital revolution. So what are governments doing to develop the digital revolution from your perspective, and without risking insensitivity towards its various groups, or what could they be doing?
Yeah, well, clearly government has a big role to play, and if we're going to be an innovative country, have great skills. I think Jennifer Westcott, the BCA leader, recently said in a roundtable, I think it was, that her vision is for Australia to have the most skilled, the most trained, the most resilient talent in Australia. That's not just a job for industry, it's not just a job for universities, it's not just a job for government. So collaboration is the key across all of those. Government itself can lead the way as well by, it's a very, very big service provider, largest in the country. So it itself can innovate, and there's a lot of things that we've worked with some government organisations. In fact, we've worked with the Department of Innovation, the Industry, Innovation and Science, which, at its heart is all around innovating for Australian businesses. And we've worked with that organisation to, help it actually in the way that it interacts with all the business users, be able to access information to do business better in Australia. So it's an example itself of government, being innovative, and being a great service provider, at the same time as it has a role around, let's say, frameworks, policies, bringing out the recommendations around innovation, and encouraging businesses to invest in innovation and research.
That actually sounds quite positive, actually, but I wanted to continue a little bit on the government theme.
Okay.
Do you see any political or cultural obstructions that would create barriers to economic prosperity? So you mentioned some positives there, but through digital transformation. So if so, what could be done about them?
Yeah, that's a loaded, a loaded question. I mean, I really think that we've got to think about what are the enablers. And so we've got, I've talked about, there's a lot of parties here that can collaborate. I don't mean political parties, I mean industry, academic and government that need to collaborate. And I think if we really turn our mind to, what are the enablers? So we've spoken a little bit about skills, that's absolutely critical, but how do we get, the most talented, the most skilled and the most resilient? So we've got to, be thinking about the knowledge economy. We've got to be thinking about innovation. We certainly have to reach into, kids in schools, and starting right back, there at the beginning, the 5, the 6-year-olds that are all going to be digital natives, they are now, and how they view, their role and what their future skills and development is. So it's a really sort of all-encompassing topic. One of the things I'd say is that, we had a culture of innovation, as I mentioned earlier. I think we've got a lot of examples of unicorn organisations that have gone from the backyard garage through to $1 billion. I think Atlassian, Kogan, we've got a lot that we can actually draw from as well in terms of organisations that are powerful.
Yeah, so thanks for that. Just following on, I want to keep sort of probing on that line because we're talking about all skills and going to the children and all that sort of discussion. So related to that, and again around the government aspect, the government is sometimes criticised for outsourcing, ICT, and of course it also happens in the private sector, so it's not just government itself. So how can Australia's existing workforce and rising ICT generation expect their environments to change as a consequence of outsourcing?
Yeah, so outsourcing, as you said, it's not just government, it's across the private sector, and in fact we're a very mature economy, and in mature economies outsourcing has been around for a long time, and it is a way not only to be able to access skills at scale, but it is a way to make sure that some of the more routine elements of, let's say in the ICT area, looking after, let's say, networks and things like that, can be done, aren't mission critical, and can be done by people to whom it is core and mission critical. So there's certainly a role to play there in terms of outsourcing. There are some changes, some trends that we're seeing. Some organisations are bringing some capabilities in-house. A lot of that's associated with where that a great experience needs to resonate. So human-centred design, it's kind of hard to do that on an outsourced basis, but that tends to be the co-sourced or more in-house. So we're seeing some change around that whole sort of area of design, creative skills. So we're seeing a change there. But I would anticipate that outsourcing is certainly part of the way that we operate in the future. Then if we think about, okay, so I'm thinking about going into ICT, going into digital, going into creative, what is my future? I liked, years ago I read this article, I didn't write it, I'd have liked to have, but I wrote what Bernard Salt said. He talks a lot about what's happening in the demographic way and so forth. He talked about geeks with personalities, being the future. So when I think of, and by the way, I'm not talking about ICT people being geeks, but really what I'm saying there is whatever that competency is, skills we need in the future, that personality side is the human side. So we need people with more advanced analytics that can bring insight and share that insight, that can collaborate, great at teamwork. Those are the skills that we should be building, alongside the competencies, whether it's, design skills, visual design, creativity, as well as the tech skills.
That's great. Thanks, Sarah. We'll go to a short break now, and when we return, we'll look to a few more audience questions. So we'll be right back.
Our next generation are preparing for jobs that do not yet exist. The possibilities are breathtaking. Using technology, our children have the ability to solve the world's big problems. Think food security, population growth, climate change, cancer. Our vision is for Australia to be a world leader in technology talent, one where every child can fulfil their potential. Welcome back to ACS Industry Insights.
It's time now to take a couple more of your questions. So Jigna would like to know how machine learning will benefit the future.
Well, machine learning is, one of these emerging tech areas, and it is these types of technologies that it's actually going to, bring about the, significant changes. Because if we can help machines and we can help them learn, and that will actually help more sophisticated decision making being able to be what's the word I'm looking for? Produced, I was going to say, produced by technology. So, so what's a good example of this is that, let's think about that insurance example before and think about, well, maybe if a machine was able to understand you a little bit more, Michael, understand the risk associated with you, how often you might claim, and it's been fed some information and developed patterns, might be able to assess the risk, might be able to then think about what's the premium you might be charged, what's the risk associated with having you as a, as on the books of the insurance company. So really, this is what we're seeing as some of the huge advances that will come, machine learning and many of the associated technologies.
Yeah, AI and machine learning is certainly huge on the agenda at the moment. So we have one final viewer question, and it comes from Claudio, who asks if you can give some examples of where you see opportunities for automation in 2018.
Yeah, so automation is being used, if we were talking to an organisation today, we would typically say, if they wanted to do a pilot, we would say, okay, let's have a look at the HR function, and we would pick maybe something like leave processing, something that's quite routine, and we would look at that. It's quite a standard, high volume, routine activity, and sort of test automation there about can we take out some of those, automate some of those steps. We might look in somewhere in finance, so step out of that. And then we might look into an area which is more towards the front of organisations. So is it in an engineering organisation or sales and marketing organisation? And we would again look at our high volume, process, and, it might be, sort of actually managing a sales process with an organisation. That sales process doesn't change, the content might, but the sales process itself doesn't. So that's what we would suggest. We're seeing organisations adopt those areas pretty rapidly. And then once they can see the benefits of that and people get accustomed to it, then we look to sort of expand it in those areas.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that. And also thanks again to the viewers for submitting your questions. We're almost out of time, but I just want to ask a couple more questions of you, Sarah, particularly around the area of diversity. So, as a senior technology leader and a member of ACS's National Diversity Committee, you're well aware of the potential crisis that is in the supply and development of human capital. In 2016, the Avanade Australia culture team was named the Tech Diversity Champion. How can companies capitalise on the diversity strategies, say, modelled by Avanade?
Yeah, it's a great area to talk about, and we were delighted to win that award. For us, it was really a mark in the sand. Since that time, and very recently actually, I'm delighted to say that we were awarded the certification, one of 120 companies here in Australia, for Employer of Choice for Gender Equality through the Workplace Gender Equality Agency. We couldn't be more delighted around that. It's a journey though, so there's a great team at work who have really brought into the DNA of Avanade, and this is from top down. This is, sort of seen to be very important globally through all the regions of Avanade and certainly here. And, I wouldn't, say that, we haven't also stolen best practices from elsewhere, but when I was at the International Women's Day dinner just last month, there were three things I really shared that I thought that we going forward will do. The first is that we've been on a path. I've been at Avanade nearly 4 years, and we set certain things in motion, and we've taken ourselves from relatively low percentage to about 24% now. And so what we've done is put us in good stead. We've got a moment here, that window, to actually say, okay, what are we going to do to get to 34? What's our step change? Because we've got from about 16 to 24. What should we do next? So let's look at ourselves. We've done a lot of things already. We've stamped out pay equity. You know, we pay super to women who are on the any unpaid maternity leave. So we've done a lot of things, but we need to relook now. What's our next step change? The second is, you talked about recruitment. We think recruitment's absolutely key. And last year, I think 40% of people who joined Avanade were women. This is great. But we really need to turn our attention to retaining and how we progress women in our business. Because once they're with us, you know, can be tough, you know, staying in the ICT industry. You know, in our organisation, we have expectations sometimes of travel, working with clients, so forth. And we need to work out how we make sure that women in our business have terrific experiences. So, you know, that as well. And then the third thing, which is really around the rise of the millennials' voice. And so, you know, if you think of the, you know, what millennials are doing globally around, you know, in the US around the, you know, anti-gun rallies and in the US, that's going to bring about change. The Me Too campaign brought about change. So whilst there's a lot of us in the Gen X category that are doing, I think, you know, I'd like to think fabulous work, you know, around making sure that gender diversity is you know, important, role modelling, all of these things that I've been talking about. You know, the millennials in our businesses, they're from households where both parents worked, where they won't understand what pay equity. These are foreign topics. We need to make sure that we share the baton. We share the baton around diversity with that group, because they have a voice. And that voice pervades social much better than I can. And so just making sure that we really, you know, sort of bring the groups together. And I think actually, instead of having to wait 100 years or all these, you know, many, many decades that's quoted until there is parity, I think if we can bring the voice of millennials, or, you know, to the fore around this topic, I think we'll really achieve a lot of step change.
Yeah, that's great, and some fantastic achievements in diversity. And in a sense, you've sort of touched upon something I wanted to cover, which was around you know, tailoring of diversity programs. But I just wanted to ask one last question, which is, can there ever be too much diversity? A bit controversial there.
Yeah, well, not really, because I know that for some people it's sensitive, and you know, they feel a little bit, gosh, why are we talking about? And in fact, diversity is not just about gender, but it is a topic certainly in ICT. We also, you know, are passionate around LGBTI, people with disability, ethnicity, and so forth. But there's no doubt that gender is the biggest topic that we're grappling with. You know, I think what I'd say is, you know, let's not be afraid, you know, of this topic. It's simply around equality. You know, it's what you and I would want. It's what we want for our kids. I think, obviously, you know, we need to be sensitive about how people might react. But, you know, never more so than now, I think, you know, we need to take affirmative action. You know, we need to take very positive and overt actions. And this isn't a topic, you know, that, you know, we should shrink away from. And I think it would be better to, you know, sort of help people understand that there's just so many benefits from having equity and equality. And that's really what this is about. It's around the, you know, the benefits. It's not equality for equality's sake.
No, I fully agree with you, and I think it's an excellent last question and answer to sort of finish up on, so thanks for that. Well, and thank you for your time and for sharing your insights with ACS members and viewers. I'd like to thank ACS members and viewers for tuning in and submitting your questions. In the coming days, you can visit the ACS website to view tonight's broadcast in full. We hope to see you again for the next episode of ACS Industry Insights. Thanks again, Sarah, and good night. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks.
Oh, you made it easy.